Okay, we're going to get ready to gut this entire cabinet here. In order to do that, I'm going to have to remove this dial, of course, like I have been in the past. This can remain on there, it just slips out through the hole. And then I'll have to disconnect this here antenna jack setup, which is done with there's a couple of screws back here that need to come out. That'll take care of that real easy. I'll have to remove this thing here and disconnect the power wire from there. I'm going to have to do it anyway. The ends need to be tinned properly and done right. And then thread that power wire back through. And then I'm going to have to take loose the screws that hold this. There's some screws down here. There's one right here. I'm missing the lower screws. I'm going to have to put some screws in there when I'm done. And these screws here have to come off. The rods go all the way down through. All the way down through. Let me see if I can get that where you can see it. Those rods go all the way down through. See the rod running down between the tube and that box. And those rods will have to be removed. And then this whole setup right here. This is two boxes. This one and this one. And this entire thing will all have to be lifted out at once, all together. And I'm going to have my grandson help me. I'm going to lift this section here. He's going to lift this section here. Incidentally, there's that rubber grommet I was telling you about that fit perfect on that fine adjust knob. Perfect size. Couldn't believe it. Too bad it's not solid all the way through, but it doesn't need to be. This on-off switch has two things holding it in: a nut, and on top of the nut is a ring that tightens down against it. Both of those have to be removed in order for the switch to go back through the hole. There's also a couple of screws that need to come out of a bracket down there that holds the power cord in place. The three nuts from the rods that run all the way down through and out the bottom of the cabinet, the nuts are off, and they all have ground wires hooked to them, almost all of them. So you want to be careful with those ground wires, and because the rods have to go down through. And this one here has a ground wire that runs from this box on the left across to the box on the right. And if in the process of picking this thing up, you don't want it to separate. You got to kind of keep it together, because if it separates too far, you could yank that ground wire right up out of that tar, and then you'd have to go digging, and we don't want to do that. And then of course the last one is underneath this mess of wires right here, right there. Alright, the three rods are out. Now up underneath the head of the bolt head there is square. So it fits through the square holes in the bottom, makes it easier to tighten the nut on the other end. You don't have to worry about the bolt sitting there constantly turning around and around on you. To keep these two boxes together while we do the lifting process, I took my vice grips and I clamped them together. Just squished them together, and that'll help when my grandson's going to lift this side and I'm going to lift this side. And in a few seconds we should have this entire mess up out of here. The final item, as far as I can tell, is to remove the two screws from the bolts that hold the rectifier tube socket in. So let's go ahead and get those loose. There's one. And the other one, I've loosened them up previously. And that should enable me to remove that socket. And it does. There we go. We're now good to go. Okay, we're ready for the lifting action. I am happy to report that the deed is done. The operation went off successfully. My grandson lifted this side, I lifted this side, the vice grips held the two boxes together successfully, and it all came up, and as we got it up above the level of the cabinet. Then wifey just took the cabinet and removed it out from underneath here, and we set it right straight down. It was just a up, out with the cabinet, and straight down. Worked perfectly. So here we go. The next job is to remove this green plate. This plate is held in by screws, I believe. I'm going to check from the bottom. We get this green plate out of here, and then we're going to start cleaning up, checking out that rust. And got a little bit of work ahead of us. Not a whole lot, you know, but enough to keep me busy for a little while longer. The green plate, as expected, is held in by these two screws. It's also held in by this leg. There's 3 screws. 3 there and 3 there. This is going to be the problem. I'm going to have to dig all that crap out of there and get to that screw, I think. First I'm going to take these 2 out, but I'm almost certain I got to take that one out too. And since my mama didn't raise a fool, I'm not about to just slap that screwdriver in those screws and start twisting, because they're really rusted down in there. And I'm going to do it after they had a chance to soak with liquid wrench. I'm going to give them a good soaking, let them soak for quite a while, and then I'll come out and take them out. Meanwhile, I'm going to go in for a cup of coffee. Might as well go ahead and spray that nut right there. That's the other leg on the other sides. Now these little legs want to be stubborn, so I'm taking a little wire brush to it right now, breaking some of that stuff loose in the threads on the top. I don't want to have to cut those babies out, but I will if I have to. Well, I'm having a heck of a time getting these legs out. It comes so far and then just stops, and I've soaked it and soaked it, and it's just a flat screw, machine screw type of thing, and it's just rough. It's going to be rough going, so if you ever work on this, be very careful. Well, one finally came out, this one right here. But this one over here does not want to come out. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to run that screw back down in there and take my moto tool. Once it's sticking up a little higher than this right here, then I'm going to take the moto tool and cut it off. And then back it back down through again, and it should come out. And now I'm going to take the old moto tool with this blade, or this little cutter. I'm going to cut that baby off flush with this, because the problem is at the end of the screw. So if I eliminate that, it should come out. Well, the idea was to grind it down almost to this plate without tearing up the plate. And I think I've about got that. Got it down there, and I haven't nicked the plate one bit. So let's see what happens. I may have to wind up getting a little closer, which I could nick the plate. I hope not. Well, I think we might have some success here. Come on, baby, get up out of there. There it is. It's out. All right, all right. Alright, we're ready to rock and roll in this baby, and the first step we have to do is take some medium grit emery paper. Medium grit, and just knock off some of this heavy rust to help out the navel jelly. The navel jelly needs a little bit of help. It can't really just go through, you know, gobs and gobs of rust. You got to give it a helping hand. So we're going to knock off the heavy stuff, clean it up, and then apply the navel jelly. And that goes to both ends. This one right here as well. This is all going to be sanded down. That's the next day, and most of the rust has been removed, as you can see, on that side and over here. Almost all of it gone. And what we're going to do now is go ahead and strip off all this old nasty paint. And I'm going to use regular old clean strip. And then after I get it all removed, all the paint off and get it nice and clean, I'm going to put one more little coat of navel jelly on there to make sure the last of the rust is removed. Then we'll go ahead and prime it and paint it. The original color on this was fairly light. It wasn't as dark as what it is now. After it aged, it got pretty dark, and the closest paint I could find to it is some Valspar. And it should do the job. It's a satin finish, but the color about matches up. Alright, after the strippers had a chance to do its thing, a little bit of help from a wire brush, it's just about done. Alright, the final touch is put a little bit of lacquer thinner on a thick rag and just kind of wipe it all down until you get down to the metal. Once we get down to the metal completely, we'll know how much rust we still have to remove. Looking really good now. I'm not going to do this to the inside of the radio cabinet. I'm not going to strip it. We're just going to remove the rust, sand it down as smooth as possible, and then just go ahead and spray paint it. making sure we get all of the rust before we do spray. I'm putting one more coat of navel jelly on each side, especially this area up here. You can see it's pretty pitted. Got quite a bit of rust down in those pits. We're going to do the best we can to get it all off of there. A quick note about navel jelly. You put it on, you leave it, and after like an hour or sometimes maybe 2, you begin to wonder, geez, I wonder if this stuff is actually still working. It is. It is. I've left it on up to 12 hours, and it just keeps eating away and eating away. And it will take away all that rust if you just give it the time. As long as it sits there, it's working. And unless it dries. You got to keep it wet, okay? I also decided to go ahead and spray that capacitor cover that got burned when I gutted it out where the paint got all brown. So I sanded it down, gave it a good shot of paint with some clear coat over the top. Today we took some major rust busting strides. All of the heavy rust has been busted off. The inside of the cabinet, the paint and everything has all been sanded. And tomorrow we're going to shower down on this thing with some navel jelly. And hopefully in the next couple days we'll have this entire thing put back together and finished. Rather than just, do spot rust removal, peck here, peck there, I said to heck with it. I went ahead and covered the entire bottom of this cabinet with navel jelly. And I'm going to let this stuff sit, keep it wet for about, probably about 6 or 7 hours. And then when I apply the Rust-Oleum primer, whatever little rust might still be left, which I hope there isn't, the Rust-Oleum primer will bind it. The metal plate has been completely derusted on both sides, as you can see. It took about 4 to 5 hours to get this thing completely stripped down to the metal. No more rust, not even a drop on this on either side. It was really pitted up in that area. She looks real good now. This area was also pitted. It'll still be pitted when we get done, but at least it won't be rusty. Alright, let's put some new clothes on this baby. It's going to look real nice. I'm using a light colored primer because the paint that's going to go over the top is also light colored. If you used a dark brown, it would take 3 or 4 coats of light colored paint to cover it. Alright, we're applying our Valspar, and I'll tell you what, that's a very close match to the original color. I'm kind of impressed with that. I don't know what it's going to dry like. It might dry a little darker, but that's okay, It looks a whole lot better than it did, folks. We'll let that dry, and then we'll hit the other side. The first application of navel jelly has been removed, and all the rust at the bottom of the chassis, with the exception of right here, is gone. And what we're going to do, I got a little spot up here. I'm going to sand it down one more time on those rust spots, and we're going to hit it again. The cabinet is still soaking in the navel jelly, and we're just about ready to wipe that off. But meanwhile, I took a look at the power supply and filter cover that came on this thing. You remember this big old box? I took it off. Big old sucker. And it had some rust on it, and I'm going to go ahead, and soak it with navel jelly, the tabs that hold it to the chassis and all that stuff, to the cabinet. And then I gave it a light sanding. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and spot paint with the primer in the places where the rust had to be removed, and then go ahead and use up most of this Valspar green paint. No sense in wasting it just for that one little piece I painted. And we're going to repaint this entire thing also. So we'll make everything look matching and good, I hope. The spot painting has been done, so now we can lay on a nice, beautiful coat of this green. It's going to look so good. I'll tell you what, folks, I thought I could finish up all this rust removal in one video. I don't want to make one of these 20-minute videos. I never have liked that too much, but what I'm going to do is go ahead and finish painting this, and when I'm done, I might go ahead and put a coat of clear on it. But meanwhile, we're just going to go ahead and, I think, finish up this video right here. And next time we'll pick up where we left off, and we'll finish the inside of the cabinet. Until next time, this is John.